The gunshot cracked across the frozen valley like a bone snapping in the silence of a cathedral. Then another, then a third. From the ridge above, a lone figure lay prone behind a snow-covered boulder, eye pressed to a rifle scope, breath steady despite the 18-degree below zero wind cutting through layers of thermal gear. Below, 23 armored vehicles sat frozen in the mountain corridor, their advance halted by something their commanders had not anticipated. One shooter, one woman, one ghost they had already declared dead. But that moment would come later. First, there was the tower. First, there was the fire. First, there was the choice that would define everything. 18 hours earlier. The forward operating base sat nestled in a valley between two ridgelines in northwestern Montana, 40 miles from the Canadian border. It was a temporary installation, established 3 weeks prior for a joint military exercise that had grown complicated when intelligence suggested hostile forces were probing the northern frontier. Lieutenant Meredith Callahan stood outside the command tent, checking her gear for the third time. Her pack contained everything she would need for a week alone on the mountain. Rations, ammunition, cold weather equipment, a radio that would be her only connection to the world below. She was 28 years old, 5'7", brown hair pulled back tight beneath her watch cap. Her hands moved with the precision of someone who had performed these checks 1,000 times before. Meredith had qualified as a sniper at Fort Benning 2 years earlier, posting the highest scores in her class. Before that, she had been a competitive rifle shooter, winning the NCAA championship at 21. Before that, she had been a girl in rural Wyoming who spent every weekend with her father at the range, learning to read wind and distance and the subtle art of patience. Her father was gone now. Sergeant First Class Thomas Callahan, retired. 22 years in the Army, including service in the Gulf War. He had spent his final years as a marksmanship instructor at Fort Benning, teaching the next generation what he had learned in the sand, in the heat and the chaos of that brief, violent conflict. He died of a heart attack when Meredith was 22. She enlisted 6 months later. Now she stood in the Montana cold, preparing for a mission that should have been routine. Observation duty. Watch the eastern approach. Report any movement. Do not engage. Simple. Behind her, the tent flap opened. She did not turn around, but she heard the voices clearly enough. "You're really sending her up there alone?" Lieutenant Trent Holloway, 34 years old, leader of the relief team that would rotate with her in 5 days. He had made his opinion of female soldiers clear from the moment Meredith arrived at the base, and he had made his opinion of female snipers even clearer. "Tower 7 is the most exposed position we have." Colonel Virgil Brennan's voice was calm, measured. He was 62 years old, a veteran of the Gulf War and the early days of Iraq. The men called him Hawk, though never to his face unless invited. "It requires our best observer. Lieutenant Callahan is our best observer." "With respect, sir, she's a competition shooter. Targets don't shoot back." "She scored higher at Benning than you did, Holloway, higher than anyone in 15 years. "Paper targets, sir, and controlled conditions. That mountain is neither." Meredith turned then. She met Holloway's eyes without expression. He was taller than her by 6 inches, broader by 50 pounds. He had the look of a man who had never doubted himself in his life. "Lieutenant Holloway," she said, "I appreciate your concern." "It's not concern, Callahan. It's reality. You're a girl playing with guns. When the temperature drops and the wind kicks up and you can't feel your fingers anymore, you'll wish you'd stayed somewhere warm." "I'll be fine." "You'll be frozen, or worse." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Try not to break a nail up there." He walked away. Meredith watched him go, her face betraying nothing. Colonel Brennan stepped beside her. He was a tall man, weathered by decades of service, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen more than most people could imagine. He did not speak for a long moment. "He's an ass," Brennan finally said. "Yes, sir. But he's not entirely wrong. That tower is brutal. The cold alone has broken good soldiers." "I understand, sir." Brennan was quiet again. Then he reached into his pocket and produced a photograph, worn at the edges, creased from years of handling. He held it out to her. Meredith took it. The image showed 2 men in desert camouflage standing beside a Humvee. One was young, maybe 25. The other was older, with a familiar smile. Fort Benning, 1994, Brennan said. Your father was my instructor, best damn shooter I ever knew, and he taught me everything about reading terrain and trusting my instincts. He paused. He talked about you constantly, said his daughter would outshoot anyone he ever trained. Meredith stared at the photograph. Her father looked so young, so alive. I'm retiring in 3 months, Brennan continued. After this deployment, I'm done. They've asked me to recommend my replacement as chief instructor at Benning. He met her eyes. I want it to be you. She looked up sharply. Sir, this mission is your final test. Not because I doubt you, because I want everyone else to stop doubting you. Come back from that mountain with a clean report, and I'll make the recommendation. And if I don't come back, Brennan smiled slightly, then I'll have been wrong about you, and I'm never wrong. He turned and walked toward the command tent. At the entrance, he paused. Your father wrote me a letter before he died. He said you didn't need to prove anything to anyone, but he also said that when the opportunity came, you wouldn't let it pass. Brennan looked back at her. Don't let it pass, Lieutenant. Then he was gone. Meredith stood alone in the cold, holding the photograph, feeling the weight of everything it represented. Her father's faith, Brennan's trust, Holloway's contempt. She tucked the photograph into her breast pocket, shouldered her pack, and began walking toward the helicopter that would carry her to Tower 7. The watchtower stood at 7,800 feet, a skeletal structure of timber and corrugated metal bolted into granite. 4 walls, 1 roof, a stove that burned wet wood and produced more smoke than heat, a single window facing east, overlooking the valley corridor that served as the only viable route for vehicle traffic within 30 kilometers. Meredith arrived at 1400 hours on a Tuesday. The helicopter couldn't land, so she rappelled down with her gear, hitting the snow in a crouch and moving immediately toward the structure. By the time the chopper's sound faded, she was already inside, already assessing, already settling into the rhythm that would define her next 5 days. The first 2 days passed without incident. She established her routine. Wake at 500, check the perimeter, scan the valley, report to base at 600, 1200, 1800, and 2400. Eat when hungry, sleep when possible, keep the stove burning. The temperature dropped steadily. By the 3rd day, it was 15 degrees below zero. By the 4th, the wind had picked up, screaming through gaps in the wooden walls, making the entire structure groan and sway. On the 5th day, the relief team was supposed to arrive. They did not. Meredith waited until 1400 hours, then tried raising base on the radio. Static. She adjusted frequencies, tried again. More static. Finally, a voice broke through, distant and broken. Tower 7, this is base. Do you copy? Base, this is Tower 7. Copy. Relief team is overdue. Request status. The response came in fragments, swallowed by interference. Crew team encountered. Hostile. 4 men. Position unknown. Then silence. Meredith tried for an hour to re-establish contact. Nothing. The radio was functioning, but something was blocking the signal. Weather, maybe, or something else. She moved to the window, scanned the valley below. Visibility was poor. Snow had been falling steadily for 6 hours, reducing the world to shades of white and gray. She could see perhaps 200 meters. Beyond that, nothing. She thought about the relief team, Holloway and his 3 men. They had left base yesterday morning, planning to hike the mountain trail that connected the valley floor to the tower's position. An 8-hour journey in good conditions. Longer in this weather, but they should have arrived by now, unless they couldn't. Meredith sat down on her cot, considering her options. Protocol was clear. Maintain position, continue observation. Report when communication is restored, but protocol assumed communication would be restored. Protocol assumed the relief team was simply delayed. Protocol did not account for the possibility that she was alone, truly alone. She pulled her father's letter from her pack, the one he had written 3 weeks before his death. She had read it so many times that she had memorized every word, but she read it again anyway, letting his voice fill the silence of the tower. Mary, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to see everything you'll become. But I want you to know something. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You never did. The people who doubt you will always find reasons to doubt. The people who believe in you don't need proof. But here's the thing about life. Sometimes the opportunity comes. The moment when everything you've trained for, everything you've prepared for, comes down to a single choice. When that moment arrives, don't let it pass. You have everything you need inside you. You always did. I love you. Dad Meredith folded the letter carefully, returned it to her pack. Then she heard it. Voices. Faint, crackling, coming through the radio she had left on the table. She moved quickly, grabbed the handset, listened. The voices were not speaking English. She recognized the language, though she did not understand it. Eastern European, maybe. Russian or something close to it. Multiple speakers, coordinating something. Then through the interference, she heard a word she understood perfectly. A name. Holloway. Her blood went cold. She pressed her ear closer to the speaker, straining to catch more. The voices continued, mixing with static. But she caught enough. Captured. 4 of them. Moving with the column. Column. Meredith moved to the window, peered into the storm. She could see nothing. But somewhere out there, in the darkness beyond the snow, something was moving. Something with vehicles. Something with soldiers. Something with prisoners, including the man who had called her a girl playing with guns. She checked her watch. 1847 hours. Sunset had come and gone without her noticing. The world outside was black now, the snow falling harder than ever. Then the first shell hit. The explosion ripped through the night 200 meters east of the tower. The flash lit up the snowfall like lightning, and the sound arrived a half-second later, a deep boom that rattled the walls and sent dust cascading from the rafters. Meredith was already moving. She grabbed her rifle, her pack, her ammunition. Training took over, muscle memory guiding her hands while her mind processed the situation. A second shell hit closer. 150 meters. The tower shook. They were walking their fire toward her position. Artillery, professional. Whoever was out there knew exactly where she was and exactly how to destroy her. A third shell. 100 meters. Glass shattered, wood splintered. Meredith felt the concussion in her chest, tasted blood where she had bitten her tongue. She had maybe 60 seconds. The radio crackled one final time. She grabbed the handset, screamed into it. Tower 7 under fire. Repeat, under fire. Artillery barrage, close proximity. Request immediate support. Static. Tower 7 to any station. Does anyone copy? Static. She threw the handset down, shouldered her pack, and kicked open the door. The cold hit her like a physical wall. Negative 18 degrees, wind gusting to 30 miles per hour, visibility near zero. She couldn't see 20 feet in front of her, but she could see the muzzle flashes in the valley below. 3 positions firing in sequence. Another shell screamed overhead. Meredith ran. She sprinted north, away from the tower, her boots punching through the snow with each stride. Behind her, the next shell struck. Direct hit. The explosion lifted her off her feet. She hit the ground rolling, covered her head as debris rained down. Burning timber, twisted metal, glass that hissed as it melted snow. She looked back. Tower 7 was gone. In its place, a pillar of fire that clawed at the black sky, orange and furious against the falling snow. The structure was collapsing in on itself, consumed by flames that seemed impossible in this cold. Everything she had, her shelter, her supplies, her communication, gone. Meredith lay in the snow, watching the fire burn, feeling the heat on her face even from 30 meters away. Then she pushed herself up and started climbing. The decision came without conscious thought. She could go south, back toward base. It would take 2 days on foot in this weather, maybe longer, but she would eventually reach friendly lines. She would survive, or she could go north, up the ridge, higher into the mountains, where the cold was worse and the terrain was deadlier, but the vantage point was better. From up there, she could see the entire valley corridor. She could see what was coming, and maybe, just maybe, she could do something about it. Meredith thought about Holloway, about the voices on the radio, about the column moving through the darkness below. She thought about her father's letter. When that moment arrives, don't let it pass. She thought about Brennan's words. Don't let it pass, Lieutenant. She started climbing. The slope was brutal, 45 degrees in places, covered with loose scree and ice. Her fingers went numb within the first 20 minutes despite her gloves. Her lungs burned with each breath, the altitude stealing oxygen, the cold stealing everything else. She fell twice. The first time, she caught herself on a rock outcropping, hanging there for 5 seconds while her boots found purchase. The second time, she slid 10 meters before jamming her rifle stock into the snow to arrest her descent. But she kept climbing. 90 minutes. That's how long it took. 90 minutes of darkness and wind and cold that felt like it was trying to kill her with every step. But at 0345 hours, Meredith reached the top of Eagle Ridge. The wind hit her immediately, a horizontal blast that nearly knocked her off her feet. She dropped to one knee, braced herself, scanned the terrain. To her east, the valley. Still dark, but she could make out the shape of it now, the way the corridor narrowed between two peaks before opening into the flatter ground beyond. To her south, the remains of Tower 7. Just a faint glow now, the last embers dying in the snow. To her north, open ridge, exposed, deadly if anyone was looking. But no one was looking. They thought she was dead. Meredith found her position, a cluster of boulders near the eastern edge of the ridge, offering natural cover and a wide field of fire. She settled in behind them, arranged her ammunition within easy reach, checked her rifle's action. Remington 700. Military issue. 308 caliber. She had fired it 600 times in training, 32 times in combat. She knew the trigger pull weight to the ounce, knew the exact click of the bolt, knew how the barrel heated after sustained fire. She checked the magazine. 5 rounds loaded, 20 more in her pack, 25 rounds total. That was all she had, all that stood between the enemy column and the base beyond. She pulled out her thermal blanket, wrapped it around her shoulders, settled into position. Then she waited for dawn. The cold was a living thing. It crawled into her bones, found the gaps in her clothing, turned her extremities to stone. Meredith flexed her fingers constantly, squeezed them into fists, forced blood back into the tissue. She ate 1 protein bar, chewing slowly, letting her body process the calories. She drank from her canteen, breaking through a layer of ice to reach the water beneath. At 0530, the sky began to shift from black to dark blue. At 0600, she could see the valley floor clearly through her scope. At 06015, she saw them coming. The column emerged from the storm like a serpent uncoiling. Armored reconnaissance vehicles first, 3 of them moving slowly, turrets rotating as they scanned the ridgelines. Behind them, more vehicles, transport trucks, APCs, a command vehicle with multiple antennas bristling from its roof. Meredith counted. 9, 12, 15, 23 vehicles total. And behind the lead elements, scattered among the transports, soldiers on foot, dozens of them, maybe more. She adjusted her scope, scanned the column systematically, looking for something specific, looking for the thing she had heard on the radio. There, 3rd truck from the rear, 2 figures in the back, their hands bound, their heads down, American uniforms. Holloway and 1 other, probably from his team. They were alive. Meredith felt something shift in her chest. The man who had mocked her, the man who had called her a girl playing with guns. He was down there, captured, helpless, and she was up here with 25 rounds. She could leave. Still, she could slip away, make her way back to base, report what she had seen. Let someone else handle this. Let the professionals with their artillery and their air support and their battalions deal with a problem this size. But by then, the column would be through the corridor. By then, the base would be under attack. By then, Holloway and the other prisoner would be dead or worse. By then, it would be too late. Meredith settled her crosshairs on the lead vehicle. She watched the commander standing in the top hatch, scanning the ridges with binoculars. He was looking right at her position, but he wasn't seeing her. He was seeing snow and rock and empty space. He was seeing what he expected to see. Nothing. The sun broke over the eastern peaks. Golden light flooded the valley, turning the snow brilliant white, making her squint even through the scope. She found her target. The officer in the command vehicle, 4th in line. Better insignia, more authority. The kind of man whose death would cause chaos, she calculated. Distance, 1,200 meters. Wind, 15 knots from the west. Temperature, affecting bullet trajectory, requiring compensation. She adjusted her aim. 4 inches low, 6 inches left. Her finger rested on the trigger. Light pressure. Not yet. The column continued forward. The officer turned to look at something behind him. Meredith exhaled slowly, let half the air out of her lungs, held it there. The crosshair settled on his chest. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The sound cracked across the valley, sharp and flat and unmistakable. Through the scope, she saw the officer jerk backward, saw him disappear into the vehicle. She worked the bolt, ejected the spent casing, chambered a new round. Below, the column had frozen. 23 vehicles, motionless. Soldiers scrambling for cover, weapons raised, searching for a target they couldn't see. Someone fired a burst toward the southern ridge. The wrong direction entirely. Meredith shifted her aim, found a soldier climbing out of the vehicle behind the command unit. Center mass, adjusted, fired. He went down. 2 shots, 2 hits. She worked the bolt again. The valley erupted with gunfire. Muzzle flashes everywhere. But none of it was aimed at her. They still didn't know where she was. They were shooting at shadows, at ghosts, at their own fear. Meredith found her third target, a soldier taking cover behind a transport truck, using the front wheel for protection. She aimed for the gap between the wheel and the axle. Fired. The bullet passed through the gap, struck the soldier in the side. 3 shots, 3 hits. The column was in chaos now. Officers shouting orders that no one could hear over the gunfire. Soldiers running between vehicles, looking for cover that didn't exist. And somewhere in the back, 2 American prisoners watching it all unfold. Meredith allowed herself one thought. I'm coming for you, Holloway, whether you like it or not. Then she returned to her work. The first counterattack came at 6:45. Meredith had fired 7 rounds by then. 7 rounds, 6 confirmed hits. The column had pulled back 300 meters, abandoning 2 vehicles and leaving 4 bodies in the snow. But they were learning. She watched through her scope as infantry dismounted from the transports, forming into small teams. 4 soldiers each, 6 teams total. 24 men moving on foot, using the terrain for cover, advancing in coordinated bounds. They were good, professional, the kind of soldiers who had trained for exactly this situation. But they were still making a crucial mistake. They still thought they were hunting a forward observer. Someone calling in fire support from a distance. Someone who would run when pressed. They didn't understand what they were facing. Meredith let them advance. She needed them clustered, needed them committed to their approach before she revealed her position again. The lead team reached the first abandoned vehicle. A sergeant was directing them, pointing toward the southern ridge, where the muzzle flashes had been coming from. Except they hadn't. That was just where he thought they had been. Meredith put her crosshairs on the sergeant. Center mass, adjusted for distance, wind, temperature. Fired. He dropped without a sound. The other soldiers dove for cover. Return fire started immediately, bullets snapping through the air overhead, striking the rocks around her position. She was already moving. Roll left, 10 meters. Find new cover. Settle in. Acquire target. The incoming fire was still hitting her old position. They hadn't adjusted. She found a soldier trying to set up a machine gun behind a low wall of snow. Fired before he could finish. He went down. The soldier beside him grabbed for the weapon. She fired again. 6 rounds remaining in this magazine. 14 in her pack. The teams were pinned now, caught between the abandoned vehicles and her position on the ridge. They couldn't advance without exposing themselves. They couldn't retreat without exposing themselves. They were stuck. Meredith shifted position again. Standard sniper protocol. Never stay in one location after firing. She moved 30 meters west, found a depression in the rock that gave her a different angle on the valley. Settled in, scanned, waited. One of the teams was trying to flank, moving west along a rocky outcropping, using the terrain to mask their approach. Smart, but not smart enough. She tracked them through her scope. 4 soldiers moving in pairs. She waited until they committed to the movement, until they were fully exposed. Fired. The first one went down. Fired again. Missed. The cold was affecting her more now. Her calculations were slightly off. Adjusted. Fired. The second one dropped. The remaining two soldiers broke and ran, dragging their fallen comrades behind them. The flanking attempt collapsed. Meredith lowered her rifle slightly, took a breath. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from cold, from exhaustion, from the adrenaline that was burning through her system like fire. 8 rounds remaining. She had stopped the first counterattack, but they would come again. They always came again. At the base of the valley, 3 kilometers away, the column's commander was having a very bad morning. Dragan Voss stood in the back of his command vehicle, studying a map that had become useless in the last 30 minutes. He was 42 years old, a former mercenary with experience in a dozen conflicts across 3 continents. He had fought in wars that never made the news, killed men whose names he never learned, and survived situations that should have been fatal. This was supposed to be simple, a quick strike through the mountain corridor, hitting the American base before they could respond. The watchtower had been the only obstacle, and his artillery had reduced it to ash 6 hours ago. The observer was dead. The path was clear. Everything was going according to plan, until it wasn't. "Report," he said to his executive officer. 7 dead, sir. 3 more wounded. The teams have pulled back to defensive positions. And the shooter? Unknown. We can't pinpoint the exact location. The fire is coming from somewhere on the northern ridge, but every time we zero in, the position changes. Voss studied the ridge through his binoculars. Snow and rock and shadow, nothing moving. "How many shooter?" he asked. "Based on the rate of fire, at least 2, maybe 3. They're coordinating well." Voss said nothing. He continued watching the ridge, thinking about what he was seeing, what he wasn't seeing. The rate of fire was slow, deliberate, each shot precisely placed. That wasn't the pattern of multiple shooters supporting each other. That was the pattern of one person taking their time, making every round count. One shooter had stopped his entire column. "Sir?" His executive officer was waiting. "It's not 3 shooters," Voss said quietly. "It's 1. "Sir?" "1 person, up there alone. That's why we can't find multiple positions. There's only 1 position at a time." The executive officer looked skeptical. "1 person couldn't cause this much damage. 1 person with a rifle and high ground has stopped armies throughout history." Voss lowered his binoculars. "We destroyed the watchtower. Confirmed kill. But someone survived. Someone climbed higher instead of retreating." He felt something he rarely felt. Respect. Whoever was up there had chosen to fight instead of run, had chosen to hold the ridge against impossible odds, had chosen to die rather than let them pass. That kind of enemy was dangerous. That kind of enemy required a different approach. "Send the armor forward," Voss said. "I want them shelling that ridge until there's nothing left but rubble. And the infantry, pull them back. We're not losing more men to a ghost." The orders went out. 3 armored vehicles broke from the column, their turrets already rotating toward the ridge. Voss watched them go. Then he made a decision. "Prep a hunting team," he said. 6 men, our best climbers. They go up the eastern slope while the armor keeps the shooter occupied. You want to flank them. I want to find them. And when I do, I want to put a bullet in their head personally." His executive officer hesitated. "Sir, with respect, you're too valuable to—" "This isn't about value." Voss picked up his rifle. "This is about finishing what we started. Someone up there is fighting alone against all of us. That person deserves to face someone worthy of the kill." He climbed out of the vehicle and started walking toward the eastern slope. Meredith saw the armor coming. 3 vehicles, heavy, their guns already tracking toward her position. She had maybe 30 seconds before they opened fire. She couldn't penetrate that armor with her rifle. The .308 rounds would bounce off the plating like pebbles off a tank, but she could penetrate flesh. The infantry was still there, behind the armor, trying to use the vehicles as cover for their advance. She found a soldier crouching behind the lead vehicle's rear wheel, exposed from her angle. Probably didn't realize it. She fired. He went down. The vehicles opened fire. Heavy rounds tore into the ridge, exploding against rock, sending fragments flying in all directions. Meredith pressed herself flat, covered her head, felt the concussions pounding through her body. 10 seconds. 20. 30. The barrage paused. She was already moving. 40 meters east, new position, different angle. The vehicles were still firing at where she had been. The soldiers behind them were advancing, confident that the barrage had done its job. She found one in her scope. Fired. Miss. The cold was getting worse. Her fingers were losing fine motor control. She was having trouble with the trigger pull. She adjusted, fired again. Hit. The advance faltered. The soldiers dropped back behind the vehicles. The vehicles resumed their barrage. Meredith relocated again. And again. Each time she fired from a different position, forcing them to adjust, keeping them off balance. But she was running out of ammunition and running out of energy. 4 rounds left. The vehicles stopped firing. She raised her head slightly, looked through the scope. They were retreating. The armor was pulling back. The infantry was following. The entire formation was withdrawing from the corridor, abandoning their advance. She had done it. For now. Meredith lowered her rifle, allowed herself 3 deep breaths. Her hands were shaking badly now. Her face felt like frozen stone. The adrenaline was fading, and her body was remembering that it was supposed to be shutting down in this cold. She ate her second protein bar, drank the last of her water, wrapped the thermal blanket tighter around her shoulders. Then she heard movement on the eastern slope. She saw them through the scope. 6 soldiers climbing the ridge, using a route she hadn't considered. They were good climbers, moving fast despite the terrain, and they were already at 7,500 feet, 300 meters below her position. If they reached the ridge, she was dead. She couldn't fight 6 men at close range with 4 rounds, but she could make them pay for every meter. She found the lead climber in her scope. He was older than the others, moving with the confidence of experience. Not a soldier, something else. A mercenary, a hunter. She recognized the type. Her father had told her about men like this. Men who killed for money, for sport, for the simple joy of being better than their prey. This was the man who had ordered the attack on her tower. The man who was commanding the column. He had come himself. She felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear, something else. Recognition. This was the moment her father had written about. The moment when everything came down to a single choice. She put her crosshairs on the lead climber, adjusted for the steep angle, for the wind, for the cold. Fired. The round struck Rock 6 inches from his head. He dove for cover, pressing himself into a crack in the slope. 3 rounds left. The other climbers scattered. They were pinned now, unable to advance without exposing themselves to her fire. But she couldn't hold them forever. And they knew it. Time became elastic. Minutes stretched. The sun climbed higher. The temperature rose to 10 below zero. The climbers tried twice more to advance. Each time she fired a single round, forcing them back. Each time she moved to a new position, 1 round left. And then the weather changed. The storm rolled in from the northwest like a gray wall closing over the world. Within 10 minutes, visibility dropped to 50 meters. Within 20, she could barely see the rocks 10 feet in front of her. The shooting stopped. There was no point in firing when you couldn't see your target. Meredith huddled behind her boulder, wrapped in her thermal blanket, listening to the wind howl across the ridge. The climbers were still out there, somewhere in the storm. They couldn't advance, but they wouldn't retreat either. They were waiting for the same thing she was. A break in the weather, a chance to finish this. She checked her rifle. 1 round chambered, that was all. 1 bullet to stop 6 men. She thought about Holloway, still down in the valley, still a prisoner. She thought about Brennan, waiting at the base, probably believing she was dead. She thought about her father, watching from wherever fathers go when they leave this world. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. But this wasn't about proving anything. This was about doing what needed to be done. Meredith started moving. 2 hours in the storm. She circled east, then north, using the weather as cover, using her knowledge of the terrain to navigate where the climbers couldn't follow. They were searching for her. She could hear them calling to each other, their voices carried on the wind, distorted and fragmented. She found a position above them, a narrow shelf of rock overlooking the route they would have to use when the storm cleared. She settled in and waited. Her hand slipped on a patch of ice. She caught herself, but not before the rough stone tore through her glove and opened a gash across her palm. Blood dripped onto the snow, red on white, impossible to hide. She wrapped the wound with a strip torn from her thermal blanket. It would slow the bleeding, but it wouldn't stop it. And if they found the blood trail, they would know exactly where she was. The storm began to lift at 11:30 hours. Visibility returned in stages. 50 meters, 100, 200. Meredith saw them first. 5 soldiers spread across the slope below her, searching the rocks, looking for any sign of their quarry. 5, not 6. Where was the 6th? She scanned the terrain through her scope, looking for the leader, the older man, the hunter. He wasn't there. A sound behind her, the scrape of boot on stone. She spun, raising her rifle. He was 30 feet away, climbing onto the shelf from the northern edge. He must have circled around, using the storm, using the same tactics she had used. Dragon Voss. His rifle was already up, already aimed. They stared at each other across the barrel of their weapons. Neither fired. "You're good," he said. His English was accented but clear. "Better than good, one person. All this time, I didn't believe it until I saw the blood." Meredith said nothing. "You're wounded. You're out of ammunition, or nearly. You've been up here for hours in this cold." He smiled slightly. "You should have run when you had the chance." "I don't run." "No, I can see that." He tilted his head, studying her. "Who are you?" "Lieutenant Meredith Callahan, Tower 7. Tower 7, he nodded slowly. "The tower we destroyed, you were supposed to be dead." "I get that a lot," he laughed, a genuine sound without malice. "I respect you, Lieutenant. You've killed 11 of my men today, stopped my entire column, with one rifle and a handful of bullets." He shook his head. "In another world, we would have been on the same side." "We're not in another world." "No, we're not." His finger tightened on the trigger. "I'm going to kill you now. It's nothing personal. It's just what needs to be done." "Then do it." He hesitated, just for a moment, surprised by her calmness, by her acceptance. That moment was all she needed. Meredith didn't aim at Voss. She aimed at the rock wall above him, where a shelf of snow and ice had accumulated during the storm. She fired, her last bullet. The round struck the rock. The impact shattered the ice, and 200 pounds of frozen debris came crashing down. Voss tried to move, but he was too slow. The avalanche caught him, swept him off his feet, buried him up to his chest in snow and rock. His rifle flew from his hands, landed 10 feet away. Meredith was already moving. She crossed the distance in seconds, kicked the rifle further away, planted her boot on his chest. She drew her sidearm, pressed the barrel against his forehead. Voss looked up at her, snow in his hair, blood on his face where the falling debris had cut him, but no fear in his eyes. "Well played," he said. "I didn't see that coming. That was the point." "You going to kill me?" Meredith considered. This man had tried to destroy her, had captured her comrades, had led an army through her mountains to attack her people. But dead men couldn't answer questions, and a commander like this would know things worth knowing. "No," she said. "You're more valuable alive." She pulled zip ties from her pack, secured his hands behind his back. He didn't resist. "Your men are down there," she said. 5 of them. They'll come looking when the shooting stops. They'll kill you." "Maybe." She finished securing his bonds, stepped back. "Or maybe they'll see their commander trussed up like a Christmas turkey and decide the smart play is walking away." She keyed her radio. It had been silent for hours, but there was a chance the weather had cleared enough for a signal to get through. "Any station, this is Tower 7. Does anyone copy?" Static, then faint but clear. "Tower 7, this is base. We copy. What is your status?" Meredith looked down at Voss, looked out at the valley below, where 23 abandoned vehicles sat in the snow, where bodies lay scattered across the corridor, where a column that should have destroyed her base had been stopped cold. "Status is complicated," she said. "I need extraction, and tell Colonel Brennan I have a present for him." "Say again, Tower 7. Enemy commander, captured, and 2 American POWs still in the valley. The column retreated, but they left prisoners behind." A long pause, then, "Tower 7, We thought you were KIA. Meredith smiled for the first time in 18 hours. Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated. Now send that extraction. I'm coming down. The patrol found her at 1340 hours. Sergeant Dale Pritchard had been leading his squad through the upper slopes for 3 hours, searching for survivors from Tower 7. When Colonel Brennan received the radio transmission, he had dispatched every available unit to the ridge. They expected to find a body, maybe two if any of the relief team had made it that far. They did not expect to find Lieutenant Meredith Callahan walking toward them through the snow, rifle slung across her back, leading a bound prisoner by a length of rope. Pritchard raised his hand to halt his squad. "Hold fire! Friendly!" He ran forward, reaching Meredith as she stumbled slightly on a patch of ice. Her face was pale beneath the windburn, her lips cracked from dehydration, her right hand wrapped in a bloody bandage. But she was walking, and she was alive. "Lieutenant," Pritchard said, "we need to get you to medical." "I can walk." "Ma'am, with respect, you can barely stand." "I walked down off that ridge. I can walk to the base." He looked at her, saw the steel in her eyes, nodded slowly. "All right, but we're staying close." He turned to his squad, gestured for them to form around her. Then he noticed the prisoner, an older man, hands secured behind his back, face bloodied but expression calm. "Who is this?" "Dragon Voss, enemy commander. He'll have intelligence value." Pritchard stared at her. "You captured the commander?" "Among other things." "Ma'am, what happened up there?" Meredith was quiet for a moment. The wind had died down, and in the silence, she could hear nothing but the crunch of snow beneath their boots. "I did my job," she finally said. "That's all." They moved down the mountain in a loose formation, Pritchard's squad spread out in a protective ring. Meredith kept pace despite her exhaustion, refusing every offer of assistance. The only concession she made was allowing one of the soldiers to take custody of Voss. Halfway down, one of the younger soldiers worked up the courage to speak. "Ma'am, were you the one shooting at the column this morning?" Meredith nodded. "How many of them were there?" 23 vehicles, maybe 100 infantry. "And how many of you?" "Just me." The soldier fell silent. The whole squad fell silent. They continued down the mountain without another word. The base was chaos when they arrived. Word had spread ahead of them. The ghost of Eagle Ridge, some were calling her. The woman who had stopped an army. Soldiers lined the paths between tents, watching as Pritchard's squad escorted her through the perimeter. Meredith kept her eyes forward. She wasn't interested in attention. She was interested in answers. Colonel Brennan met her at the entrance to the command tent. He was standing at attention, something she had never seen him do for anyone. "Lieutenant Callahan," he said. "Report." Meredith stopped in front of him, tried to salute. Her arm barely responded. 17 confirmed enemy casualties, sir. 23 vehicles abandoned in the corridor. Enemy column has retreated to their original position." She paused. 2 American POWs are still in the valley. Lieutenant Holloway and one other. I couldn't get to them, but the column left them when they pulled back. Brennan absorbed this. His face gave nothing away. "And the prisoner? Dragon Voss, their commander. He tried to hunt me personally. I discouraged him." Something flickered in Brennan's eyes. Might have been a smile. Might have been pride. "Get to medical, Lieutenant. That's an order." "Sir, medical, now. I'll debrief you when you're warm and functional. And when you're ready to tell me how the hell one person stopped an entire armored column with a rifle and what appears to be sheer stubbornness." Meredith nodded slowly. The adrenaline was fading now, and with it, the last of her reserves. She felt the cold settling deeper into her bones, felt her legs starting to shake. "One more thing, sir." "Yes?" "The POWs, Holloway. Can we get to them?" Brennan nodded. "I've already dispatched a recovery team. We'll have them back before nightfall." He paused. "You saved their lives, Lieutenant. Whatever history you have with Holloway, you saved his life today." Meredith said nothing. She turned and walked toward the medical tent, leaving Brennan standing in the cold. Behind her, she heard him say quietly to his aide, "Get me everything we have on this Voss and clear my schedule. When she's ready to talk, I want to be the first to hear it." The field hospital was a heated tent with 12 cots, most of them empty. A medic named Carson took charge of Meredith immediately, guiding her to a bed in the corner, wrapping her in heated blankets, starting an IV for fluids. Core temperature is 95 degrees, Carson said, reading the thermometer. You're hypothermic. Another hour up there, and we'd be having a different conversation. But we're not. No, ma'am, we're not. He examined her hand, the gash across her palm. This is going to need stitches, and you've got frostbite on 3 fingers. Minor, but you'll need to keep them warm and dry for a few weeks. Meredith nodded. She was having trouble focusing. The warmth of the tent was making her drowsy, and she hadn't slept in over 30 hours. Ma'am, Carson was looking at her with concern. When's the last time you slept? I don't remember. I'm going to give you something to help you rest. You're safe here. Whatever happened up there, it's over. Meredith wanted to argue, wanted to stay awake until she knew Holloway was safe, until she had finished her debrief, until she had called Emma and told her what? That she had killed 11 men today? That she had almost died? That the letter their father had written was still in her pocket, stained with sweat and blood? But her eyes were closing, and the warmth was pulling her down, and the last thing she heard before sleep took her was Carson saying to someone, "Let her rest. She's earned it." She woke to voices, low, urgent, coming from somewhere nearby. She kept her eyes closed, listening. Brought them in an hour ago. Holloway's in bad shape. Took a beating during the capture, but he'll live. And the other one? Private Morrison. Broken arm, some cuts. He's already talking about what happened. What is he saying? A pause, then. He's saying they were pinned down in the valley for 6 hours. Couldn't move forward, couldn't move back. Their commander was convinced it was a full sniper team up there. Kept sending men up the ridge to root them out. They kept coming back in body bags. How many? 11 confirmed kills. Probably more wounded who made it back to the column. And this was one woman. One woman with a bolt-action rifle. Meredith opened her eyes. Colonel Brennan was standing at the foot of her bed, speaking with another officer she didn't recognize. They both turned when they noticed she was awake. "Lieutenant," Brennan said, "how are you feeling?" "Alive, sir." "That appears to be an understatement." He pulled a chair close to her bed, sat down heavily. "We recovered Holloway and Morrison. They're both going to make it." "Good. Holloway asked to see you. When you're ready." Meredith was quiet for a moment. She thought about the man who had called her a girl playing with guns. The man whose life she had saved by not shooting the truck he was in. The man who would have died in that valley if she had made a different choice. "Send him in," she said. Brennan nodded to the other officer, who left the tent. A few minutes later, the flap opened again, and Trent Holloway stepped through. He looked terrible. Black eye, split lip, bruises covering the left side of his face. He was moving stiffly, favoring his right side where his ribs were probably cracked. But he was walking, and he was alive. He stopped at the foot of her bed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Holloway straightened. Slowly, painfully, he raised his hand in a salute. "Lieutenant Callahan," he said. His voice was rough, stripped of its usual arrogance. "I owe you my life." Meredith looked at him, saw the pride that had been shattered, saw the man beneath the bravado, the one who had spent 6 hours as a prisoner, watching an army get torn apart by a single shooter. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "We're soldiers. We protect each other." Holloway lowered his hand. His jaw tightened. "I said things. Before. Things I shouldn't have." "Yes, you did. I was wrong." The words came out like he was pulling teeth. "About you. About everything. You're the best damn shooter I've ever seen, and I was too stupid to recognize it." Meredith nodded slowly. "Apology accepted, Lieutenant. Now get yourself to medical. You look worse than I feel." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Yes, ma'am." He turned and walked out of the tent. At the entrance, he paused, looked back. "Callahan." "Yes?" "Next time we're in a firefight, I want you covering my 6. No one else." Then he was gone. Brennan, who had watched the entire exchange in silence, leaned back in his chair. That may be the first time Holloway has apologized for anything in his entire military career. People change. Some do. Brennan studied her. "You performed beyond any expectation today, beyond anything I've seen in 40 years of service. 1 person against 100, 17 kills, an enemy commander captured, and you walked off that mountain under your own power. I did what was necessary, sir. You did what was impossible. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper. I'm recommending you for the Silver Star, and I'm filing my recommendation for your appointment as chief instructor at Fort Benning, effective immediately upon my retirement. Meredith felt something shift in her chest. She thought about her father, teaching a young Virgil Brennan how to shoot. She thought about all the years of training, all the doubt, all the moments when she wondered if she was good enough. Sir, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just promise me one thing. What's that? When you're training the next generation, tell them about today. Tell them what one person can accomplish when they refuse to give up. Tell them that the measure of a soldier isn't size or strength or gender. It's will. It's the choice you make when everything is falling apart and the easy path is surrender. Brennan stood, moved toward the tent entrance. Your father used to say something. He said it to every class he ever taught. The rifle is just a tool. The real weapon is the person behind it. I never understood what he meant until today. He looked back at her. You're the real weapon, Lieutenant. Don't ever forget that. He left the tent. Meredith lay in the silence, staring at the canvas ceiling, feeling the warmth slowly seep back into her bones. She reached into her pocket, found her father's letter, unfolded it one more time. When that moment arrives, don't let it pass. She hadn't, and she never would again. 3 months later, Fort Benning, Georgia. The morning was warm and clear, the kind of spring day that made you believe anything was possible. Birds were singing in the trees lining the firing range. A light breeze carried the smell of grass and gun oil. Lieutenant Meredith Callahan stood at the front of a classroom facing 24 students, new recruits, future snipers. Some of them would wash out in the next 6 weeks. Some of them would go on to careers that would define generations. All of them were looking at her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. She knew what they were thinking. Some of them, anyway. She could see it in their eyes. A woman, teaching sniper tactics. How good could she really be? She didn't mind. She had stopped minding a long time ago. My name is Lieutenant Meredith Callahan, she said. I am your chief instructor for the next 12 weeks. During that time, I will teach you everything I know about precision marksmanship, fieldcraft, and survival in hostile environments. She paused, let her gaze move across the room. Some of you are wondering if I'm qualified to be standing here. Let me address that now. She pressed a button on the remote in her hand. The screen behind her lit up with an image. A snowy ridge, a burned watchtower, a valley full of abandoned vehicles. 3 months ago, I was stationed at an observation post in the Montana mountains. The post was destroyed by enemy artillery. I was presumed dead. Instead of retreating, I climbed to higher ground and spent the next 18 hours engaging an armored column of over 100 enemy combatants. Another image. A man in zip ties, blood on his face. I killed 17 of them, captured their commander, saved 2 American prisoners who were being held in the convoy. She clicked to the next image. A medal, the Silver Star. I did this alone, with 1 rifle and 25 rounds of ammunition. She turned off the screen. So when you're wondering whether I know what I'm talking about, remember this. Everything I'm going to teach you, I've done. In conditions worse than anything you'll face in training, against odds worse than anything you'll face in combat. She walked slowly along the front of the room, meeting the eyes of each student in turn. Many of you will doubt yourselves in the coming weeks. You'll wonder if you're good enough, if you're strong enough, if you have what it takes. She stopped at the end of the row, turned to face them again. Here's what I want you to understand. The world will underestimate you. People will doubt you. They'll tell you that you can't do something because of where you came from, or what you look like, or what they think they know about you. Her voice hardened. Those people are wrong. And when the moment comes, when everything is on the line and the easy choice is giving up, you will prove them wrong. Not for them, for yourself. She walked back to the center of the room. My father was a soldier. He served in the Gulf War. He spent 20 years in this army, and he spent his last years teaching people like you how to shoot. He used to say something that I want you to carry with you through this training and through your entire careers. She paused, letting the silence build. He said, the rifle is just a tool. The real weapon is the person behind it. She looked out at her students. Some of them were nodding, some of them were sitting straighter, some of them were looking at her with new eyes. "You are the weapon," she said. "The rifle is just how you express it. Learn to use it well. Learn to trust it. But never forget that the thing that makes you dangerous isn't the hardware. It's you." She picked up a rifle from the table beside her, checked the chamber, sighted down the barrel. "Now, let's begin." That evening, after the students had been dismissed and the range had fallen quiet, Meredith walked to the hill behind the training facility. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. She sat down in the grass, pulled out her phone, looked at the message that had arrived an hour ago. It was from Emma, a photograph of a baby, 6 weeks old now, dark hair, blue eyes, a smile that looked exactly like their father's. "Daniel is getting so big. Mom says he has Dad's nose. I think he has your stubbornness. Can't wait for you to meet him. Miss you. Love you." Meredith smiled. She typed a reply. "He's beautiful. I'll be home for Thanksgiving. We'll have a lot to catch up on. Love you too." She put the phone away, looked out at the sunset. Somewhere out there, beyond the hills and the highways and the endless American landscape, there were mountains, cold ones, dangerous ones. Mountains where watchtowers burned and soldiers fought, and sometimes, against all odds, one person could make a difference. She would probably go back someday. She was a soldier. It was what she did. But for now she was here, teaching, passing on what she knew to the next generation, honoring her father's legacy by creating new legacies in others. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Brennan, retired now, living in Arizona. "Saw your class roster. Good group. Heard you gave them the real weapon speech. Your father would be proud." "I know I am," she typed back. "Thank you, sir, for everything." His response came almost immediately. "Don't thank me. You earned it. Every bit of it. Now go make some more ghosts." Meredith laughed softly, put the phone away. The sun sank below the horizon. Stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. She thought about Eagle Ridge, about the cold and the fear and the impossible choice she had made, about standing alone against an army and refusing to run. She thought about Holloway, now serving in a different unit, reaching out every few months to check in, about Voss, in military custody somewhere, providing intelligence that had already saved lives, about Carson, the medic who had brought her back from the edge of hypothermia. She thought about her father, about the letter she still carried, about the words that had guided her through the darkest night of her life. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone, but when the opportunity comes, don't let it pass." She hadn't let it pass. And because of that, she was here, alive, teaching, building something that would outlast her, the ghost of Eagle Ridge. That's what they called her now, in briefing rooms and barracks and places where soldiers gathered to tell stories. The woman who stopped an army, the woman who walked off a mountain when everyone thought she was dead. But to the students she taught, she was just Lieutenant Callahan, the instructor with the steady hands and the quiet voice and the eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. And that was enough. That was more than enough. Final words. They burned her watchtower. They declared her dead. They sent an army to crush her and a hunter to kill her. But when dawn broke over Eagle Ridge, only one person was still standing. And it was the woman they had underestimated, the woman they had mocked, the woman who proved them all wrong. Because the measure of a soldier is not found in the battles they win or the enemies they kill. It is found in the choice they make when everything is falling apart. The choice to stand when running would be easier. The choice to fight when surrender would be simpler. The choice to believe in themselves when no one else does. Meredith Callahan made that choice. And in making it, she became something more than a soldier. She became a legend. She became a ghost. She became the proof that one person, with enough skill and enough courage and enough refusal to quit, can change the outcome of any battle. They burned her watchtower, but she burned brighter. And on that frozen ridge in the light of a Montana dawn, the world learned what she had always known. Some people don't need an army. They are the army.